I guess you have heard of the saying that disability is not inability. Now for this case, it means it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter where you come from, it doesn't matter what you can and cannot do. What matters is that you've got equal opportunities and chances, and of course your opinions and contributions to society matter. Well, no worries, we got you covered. My name is Amuge Victoria and this is the Education Forum here on UBC TV. Welcome back. You are watching the Education Forum with me, Amuge Victoria. And yes, like I mentioned before, we have guests from the National Union for Disabled Persons. And before we could go any further, let them introduce themselves. Well, we are very glad to have you on the show today. Welcome to the Education Forum. So please introduce yourself to the people.
Thank you, Victoria. I'm Sarah Leah Diana, a program officer in charge of inclusive education at the National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda, NUDIPU.
Thank you, viewers. My name is Esther Chozira. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of NUDIPU. NUDIPU is the National Union of Disabled Persons of Uganda. With us, we have the sign language interpreter, Wycliffe Bukenya. He'll be communicating to our persons with hearing impairment.
All right, well, thank you very much. And I'm actually glad to have you guys on the show. So first of all, I would first like to ask Madam Esther, what was the purpose for the formation of the National Union for Disabled Persons?
Yeah, thank you, Victoria. NUDIPU is an umbrella organization of persons with disabilities. Before it was started in 1987, we used to have smaller organizations at community level that were doing separate projects, activities like balema tuyambe, balema tukulakulane, and members felt there was need to have a national voice which would bring their issues to the national level like parliament. And around the same time there was a new government of NRM, and that time it was encouraging different groups, clusters, to have organized groups. And that's when the different community organizations decided to come together and form this NUDIPU that we are proud of today. And our main aim, our main mandate as an organization is to advocate for the rights of persons with disabilities. We influence policies, we influence programs, we work with government, we work with civil society organizations, we work with organizations of persons with disabilities with the interest of ensuring that persons with disabilities are put at the forefront of everything that is being done in this country. Yes.
All right, well, thank you very much. That is a lot of info to process, but I will. Okay, so let's continue. Now, when we are speaking of people with disability, people living with disabilities, what kind of disabilities exactly are we looking at?
Okay, thank you, Victoria. It's good you ask that question because out there, many people get confused of who a person with disability is, and when we come to elections, everyone wants to become a political leader. They want to enter into the structures because they see there is space there. But to Uganda and the World Health Organization that normally tells us who a person with disability is, and according to our Persons with Disabilities Act of 2020, we have about 8 disability categories that are broad in nature. We have persons with visual impairment. Those include that are low vision and those that are totally blind. We have persons with hearing impairment. Those include persons that are deaf and those that are hard of hearing. Then we have persons with physical disabilities. These are people who have any challenges with their limbs. It could be one leg, one hand, maybe polio, maybe accident, back, anything that is affecting the bones, we put it under physical disabilities. Then we have persons with mental disabilities. These are persons that have mental illness but are living on medication to manage their disability. We have people that have bipolar, we have people that have schizophrenia. All those are members of mental disability. Then we have persons that have epilepsy. some people think this is a medical condition, but it was approved that epilepsy causes disability, and many of them fail to perform their daily activities because of the condition. Then we have persons with albinism. I think we are all aware of who an albino person is. These are persons who are born without melanin in their bodies, so it changes their color. And in the community there, they think maybe they are Bazungu, but these are just part of us. It's only that they are lacking that component in their body. Then we have persons that persons with dwarfism. In the human rights language, we want to call them little persons. These are persons that have short stature. They are below a certain height. We normally say anyone who is 4 feet and below qualifies to be a little person. Not every short person is a little person, so we need to qualify that. Then we have persons that are deaf-blind. Someone has 2 impairments. They don't see. At the same time, they don't hear. These ones, of course, communication normally becomes a problem, but they use tactile, that is communicating by touch. Those are persons who are deaf-blind. Then we have other persons like persons with cerebral palsy. Those normally belong to different disabilities depending on how severe it is. But cerebral palsy is also the other disability. Then we have persons with intellectual disabilities. These have persons that have autism, Down syndrome, and many other intellectual issues that can not be easily seen, like dyslexia that is not normally seen, but anything intellectual falls under intellectual disabilities. Yeah, and at NUDIPU, all these disability categories, we work with them. They have single organizations that work on their issues, and these are our members. They subscribe to us, and we do our advocacy together.
All right, well, thank you very much, Madam Esther. But before I would go to Madam Diana, well, in most cases, people set up organizations, and then we have these objectives, we have visions, and we have that journey we want to reach, but then we cannot reach them sometimes. So I want to ask Madam Esther, for the years that NUDIPU has existed, are you realizing your objectives and visions?
Yes, I would say yes. I would say yes.
Okay.
Because where we started is not where we are now. We are making 35 years this year, and soon we shall be inviting UBC to celebrate with us the 35 years in November.
Okay.
But where we started, as I told you, we started with the community organizations that later came to join into the national organization. And that time there was no single policy that could recognize persons with disabilities. So NUDIPU worked hard to ensure that in the Constituency Assembly, we get a representative there who was very, very useful. Honorable Elifazma's mother late, may his soul rest in peace. He did a lot of work to ensure that the Constitution gets provisions that specifically talk about issues of disability, which for us we think is very, very important, because if we missed out in the Constitution, maybe we wouldn't be where we are now. Then along the way, we have been working hard to ensure that the different policies that are enacted by Parliament come out with clear provisions on persons with disabilities. As we talk now, we have the Persons with Disabilities Act, we have the National Council in place, which is enforcing the implementation of the Disability Act. We have ensured that other policies like the Road and Traffic Act is considerate of issues of disability. We have ensured that institutions like the Uganda Communications Commission become responsive to issues of disability, Human Rights Commission. So we see that at least there is progress in terms of the rights advocacy that we are doing as an organization. But also in terms of awareness, the communities are becoming more sensitive to issues of disability. We may not say it's 100%. If we were at 0, in terms of rating, we could be at around 60% in terms of awareness. At least you go to a place and they get to know, oh, this is a person with disability. maybe we need to identify a school where this child can go. That used not to be there. The moment you'd have a child with disability, they will say that's a curse, and that child is either killed or kept behind the house to wait for them to die, and things like that. So that is somehow reducing in communities. Even at workplaces, these days we are seeing some companies, institutions getting interested to employ persons with disabilities, which never used to be there before. At least you go for an interview and an organization is willing to even listen to you. But those days they would say, no, we are sorry, you are not the person we invited for the interviews. So you'd be left out there and then. So some of those scenarios are beginning to reduce. Then in terms of activity, like the level of independence of persons with disabilities is also improving. At least we see in the communities, every person with disability wants to do something for themselves to be able to take care of their family, to take care of their specific needs, to pay school fees for their children. So it's no longer the case that persons with disabilities used to sit there idle, crying, complaining, waiting for charity. Many of them are saying, no, I need to do something for me to earn an income. For me, I see we are making progress in that regard. But as I said, we cannot say we are at 100%. The challenges still exist, and those are the ones that still make us exist as an organization, to continue pushing and reminding the responsible entities to change policy, to change practice, to talk persons with disabilities to continue working hard to fit within this struggling economy of Uganda.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Madam Esther. Well, you have heard from the CEO. She has a lot to say about disability, and I'm very sure many of you outside there have learned about the different types of disability. We hear of disability, that. But well, today, Madam Esther has given us a lot of information. Well, you're still watching the Education Forum with me, Amuge Victoria, here on UBC TV. And yes, our topic today is inclusive education for learners with special needs. So let me go to our next guest of the day, that is Madam Diana. So Madam Diana, what is the education department of NUDIPU tasked with, and what are their studies and findings so far over the years?
So NUDIPU, as an advocacy organization, we are tasked with seeing that all children are able to access education within the mainstream schools. So our advocacy is to promote, to raise awareness on the need of these children to be included in the mainstream schools, and not just be there present, but we want them to be present, to be participating, and to be achieving within the schools that are in their communities. So we are mainly doing advocacy. We are training teachers, building capacity for teachers to manage the learners within the mainstream schools, and we are also raising awareness to the parents to be able to take these children to school. We are not doing this alone, but we work with other stakeholders who are into education, other development partners, the Ministry of Education, to see that these children are able to access education in the mainstream schools. Yes.
Okay, well, thank you, Madam Diana. And also, according to the Ministry of Education, Uganda's education system is all-inclusive and catering for all groups of people and applying various approaches. Now, how are people with disabilities fitted in this system at all levels of education?
The system, the laws in place are good, but not totally all-inclusive. And we have these beautiful acts in place. However, the implementation is still lacking. For inclusive education, we need to have an ideal school where teachers can support the different disabilities that Madam Esther talked about. We need to have training materials in the schools, instructional materials in the schools to support these learners. We need to have an accessible environment. So it is not yet the ideal that we want, because some children are still locked into special schools, because that is where they can get the best attention and the best equipment to study. However, we are advocating for inclusion. let them go and study with other children in the mainstream schools, but still achieving and progressing to the next level. So our policies are still lacking, and for that case, as the education implementers, we thought about having a policy on inclusive education so that these gaps are covered. Where it is not covered in another policy, in the education white paper, at least this inclusive education policy would be able to bring out the need. However, it is still at cabinet level. It has not yet been passed. So we are still lobbying and waiting for the conclusion from cabinet so that this policy supports us implement in mainstream schools.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Diana. Well, you're still watching the Education Forum with me, Amuge Victoria. And before we go for a short commercial break, I would like to take this question to Madam Esther. Now, children with disabilities have a low rate of initial education. Now, in most cases, we see these children going to school, but some of them do not actually transition into higher levels of education. So as NUDIPU, what steps do you think should be followed to make sure that these children actually reach a higher level of education?
Okay, thank you, Victoria. There is a lot that needs to be done, and some of it is what Diana has been elaborating. One of the biggest challenges why children do not cross the next levels is because the special schools are few. And that's where most of the children with disabilities can attain quality education, which can enable them cross the next level. And as we talk about inclusive education, as long as we are still seeing the current scenario of schools being in place, but they don't have facilities, they don't have specialized teachers that can train children with disabilities, they don't have the equipment for visually impaired, the Parkins brailers that they use, then the dream to have all the children cross the next level in an inclusive setting is still a dream. We may not easily achieve it. However, we still think that all hope is not lost. There are efforts by the Ministry of Education to have some of these provided. We are seeing the Ministry of Education trying to distribute some of the equipments like Parkins brailers, but this is still in the special schools. It's not in the inclusive setting that the policies talk about. We are also seeing some teachers being trained. There is a certificate now in Chambogo that is training all teachers to be able to handle children with disabilities when they come to class, regardless of whether they have disability or not. So maybe over the years that may help to grow the numbers that cross the next level from the inclusive setting. Then we also want to see that if this policy is in place, it's going to task government to budget for some of these things that we are talking about. Because currently when we raise the challenges that children with disabilities face in school, government is saying we don't have money. The resources are very meager for us to achieve. And remember, disability is not homogeneous. We are not the same. As you are planning for the blind, the deaf are saying where are the interpreters. As you are planning for the interpreters, children with autism are having their own challenges. As those ones are also raising issues, the deafblind are saying where is our tactile. So it needs government to have a policy that can guide them on how to plan for the different needs of children with disabilities in school. And as long as the policy is not there, then that causes a problem, because when there's no policy, there's no budget. And when there's no budget, there's no implementation of the different issues that we are raising. And also, the parents. Sometimes the parents want to take their children to school, but they're like, where can we take the children? The schools are not there, the teachers are not there. So they leave the children at home. And sometimes you find yourself failing to blame them because the facilities are not usable, are not friendly to the needs of these children. But I think something needs to be done, but this is possible when the policy is out.
All right, thank you very much, Madam Esther. Well, if you're just joining us on the show, this is the Education Forum here on UBC TV. My name is Amuge Victoria. And yes, remember, disability is not inability. And our topic today is inclusive education for learners with special needs. And our special guests here today are from the National Union for Disabled Persons. Let's go for a short commercial break and we'll be back. All right, welcome back. You're still watching the Education Forum here on UBC TV, and our topic today is inclusive education for learners with special needs, and we have guests from the National Union for Disabled Persons. So let's continue with our discussion. I think I'm learning so much. I hope whoever is watching right now is learning something from this. So yes, the government rolled out the new secondary school curriculum, which of course aims at meeting the learners' needs, especially as regards to skills training enhancement. Now, is there any follow-up to ensure that learners with disabilities are catered for under this new arrangement?
Thank you. Yeah, there's a school curriculum that was rolled out by government, as you rightly say. And learners with disabilities are part of the school. And there are some efforts around that to see that children with disabilities in school benefit from this new curriculum. But as I said, that when government is planning, many times persons with disabilities are thought of last. So we are still engaging the National Curriculum Development Center to see how children and students with disabilities can benefit from this new curriculum. Skills development is something that you don't just think about and say this will work for children with disabilities. The National Curriculum Center is already positive. They are seeing how their special needs department can continue engaging the teachers to see that learners with disabilities benefit from this new arrangement. Of course, it's a new curriculum for everyone. All teachers are still struggling to see how they learn, how to use it, and so are the students. But with our engagement, we think that we shall get there. We are still engaging.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, Madam Diana, do you take time to interface with parents and other stakeholders? This could be the administrators, to see to it that they fulfill their responsibilities when it comes to educating people with special needs.
Yes, you cannot achieve inclusive education while working alone. So parents are key stakeholders in this. Parents of children with disabilities are supported. We raise awareness, we train them on how to support children, and we make sure they are part of the school inclusion teams. Those are the structures that we use to see that inclusive education is promoted in the schools. So parents of children with disabilities are part of the school inclusion teams in the pilot schools where we are implementing inclusive education. When we go to train to build capacities of teachers in the schools, we do not only deal with the teachers, classroom teachers, the administrators are trained, the non-teaching staff like the cooks, the matrons, the nurses, the secretaries are also trained on inclusive education and how to include children with disabilities in the mainstream schools. So we ensure that all these stakeholders are brought on board, because if a teacher is able to support a learner, a matron should be able to support them in the dormitory. A secretary should be able to understand their needs. A librarian should be able to understand the needs of this learner. If the learner is visually impaired and is given print to read, are they benefiting? So we ensure that it is a whole holistic approach to inclusion. Actually, in our advocacy, we are fronting the twin track approach, where the system is changed to meet each individual learner's needs. It's something we may not achieve immediately, but at least there is positive response.
Okay.
Yes, we have good political will to support this, so it's one step at a time.
All right. So yes, since we are speaking about education, and of course we are specifying on the people living with disabilities. Now, historically, children with disabilities have been excluded from the general education system in terms of probably schools. Like, they are being made for specific institutions where they're isolated from the general community. Now, don't you think this deprives them of the equal opportunities we are talking about and chances to mix up with the community and, you know, feeling like they belong somewhere?
Yes, that is why we are advocating for inclusive education. But inclusive education is being achieved through steps. That was segregation for the children to be able to achieve. And then we moved to a stage where there was integration, where they came into the mainstream schools but stayed in small units to be able to achieve. All efforts are made in good faith to see that this child achieves in education. And now we are advocating for them to be in the mainstream, which is something we are going to achieve, but progressively. So this will help learners to be able to mix with others, to be able to learn the different cultures, behavior in society, to be able to compete, to be able to mix with other children, because as we all know, there are no institutions just to employ persons with disabilities. At the end of the day, they go out to the world and have to compete. At the end of the day, they have to go to mainstream universities. So that is why we are now making the advocacy louder to see that we move to a level where there is inclusion. From segregation, from integration, now we want it inclusive.
All right.
Yes.
So, Madam Esther, what are some of the success stories NUDIPU has been engaged with regarding education of learners with disabilities?
Okay. Yeah, there are a number of successes that we have registered. With our program on inclusive education, we are seeing increase in the enrollment of children in the pilot schools where we are. I may not say that this is for the entire country because we don't have a lot of statistics on enrollment. We are asking the ministry every now and then to ensure that in their information management system, children with disabilities are clearly captured so that we know how the enrollment is growing. However, in the pilot program that we are implementing as NUDIPU, we are seeing increase in numbers of different disability groups coming to schools. We are also seeing a lot of response by parents getting to participate in the education of their children, because recently we're giving out assistive devices in some of the schools, and you'd find that the parent is one even tells you, I have another child at home, how can that one be helped? For me, that's an indication that the parents are beginning to see the relevance of educating their child with disability. So there is that, and we are also seeing a lot of interest from the teachers to want to support this special child in school. Previously, the teachers would be the ones to chase you with your child. They'll say, we are sorry, we shall not manage that one. But we are now seeing many teachers saying, yes, bring the children, we shall handle them. Bring the children, we shall take care of them. We now know how to deal with them, bring them. Of course, there are still challenges around sign language. Some of the teachers have not learned sign language to be able to communicate to a child with hearing impairment. But those that are hard of hearing, we have been trying to support them with hearing aids to see that they are able to communicate with their friends and also with the teachers in class. And the local governments where these schools are stipulated, we are seeing them becoming supportive, giving us the right teachers in the right schools, because those days government would train teachers with special needs, and these teachers would be deployed to different places where there are even no children with disabilities. But now these days we are seeing that in the pilot schools where we are, teachers that have gone through the special needs training are being deployed to some of these schools where we are. And we think they should be carried on even in other parts of the country. Then the other success is the support that these children with disabilities are benefiting from their colleagues without disabilities. Previously, we were seeing that the non-disabled children would be the ones teasing and bullying children with disabilities who are brought in school. And that would discourage the child from being retained at school. But at least in the district where we are, we see that the children are very supportive. They come and support a child with a wheelchair. If one of the child has a visual impairment, it is the colleague that is supporting them to move around the compound. And for me, I see that as a positive thing towards inclusive education. It is still a long way to go, but we think if the same is maintained, even in other schools across the country, we would be somewhere at least.
Okay, I've heard you speak about bullying, but then I also wanted to ask, how are these children actually helped sometimes? Because I feel like they have a lot of risk to bullying and of course violence. Now when you find somebody who cannot speak, like and they're being bullied, and some of these bullies actually shut them up, that they don't have a chance to speak out their minds because they're being bullied in silence, and when it comes to talking they can't say it out there, and because they fear that these bullies are going to beat them and keep molesting them. So what measures have been put across to help these people?
Thank you, Victoria. The package that we give, like I said, we involve all stakeholders. Even the children are involved. We have the peer-to-peer package that we give the children, and then we have child rights clubs where we bring these children together to train them how to support each other, how to live harmoniously together, and how to value each other, because each of them has something to offer to the other. So in that way, actually the children without disabilities give a lot of support and protection to children with disabilities. They have buddies. They keep pairing up to support each other. Actually, these children even pick peers from home. If they are using the same route, they will not leave a child with disability at home. They will pick them and push them to school. A child with a visual impairment will have a buddy that will support them get oriented around the school. Even in class as they sit, their sitting arrangement is in such a way that they keep looking at each other and supporting each other. So in the pilot schools where we have been working, where we are working, there is no bullying because the children are now supporting each other. They are all members of the Child Rights Club. They support promoting each one's rights and ensure that everyone is safe. So this is an approach that is helping. We are not only looking at the teacher capacity, it is holistic. We also look at the children, the parents, the community leaders. So it is a beautiful approach to ensure that there is no bullying, there is no stigmatization. Each one feels safe in their environment.
All right. Madam Esther, success comes with a lot of challenges in most situations and most cases. So now as NUDIPU, what are some of the challenges the organization has faced as far as education of learners with disabilities is concerned?
Yeah, there are a number of challenges. I'll highlight some and Diana will also highlight some. One of the challenges is that whereas we push for inclusive education, we advocate for non-segregation of children with disabilities, we have no policy, as I mentioned earlier. When there is no policy, it becomes very complicated for you to demand for anything because even the budget is not there. So when there is no money, then there is nothing much you can achieve. So the lack of a policy on inclusive education is in itself a challenge. We are failing to see how teachers get trained. We are failing to see how the schools become accommodative in terms of adjusting their environment to suit the child with disability. We are failing to get the children without disabilities appreciating those with disabilities, and we alluded to bullying, violence. This comes because there is no policy. There's nothing that the head teacher is going to use to enforce some of these things to happen. The other challenge is still the attitude of parents. Whereas we are proud of those that have been responsive in bringing their children to school, we still have those that have been kept into the negativity of thinking that this child with disability is a problem, is a curse, and they still don't even want to expose these children. If you went to their homes, they'll even chase you and tell you that this is not your home, we don't have a child here. Yet the community would have told you that in that home there is a child with disability. So for me, I would really encourage parents out there not to hide children. There are those that have severe disabilities, yes, but if you brought them out and we put our heads together on what needs to be done for this child, I think this child will not remain the same. But some of them will say, mine is a spoiled child, is a wasted child, actually that's the word they say. Mine is a wasted child, there's nothing you can do about this child, and this child can never get anything out of education. So that has prevented us from supporting those that we really need to support. But also, the other challenge is the systems, the structures, the services, they are not there. I'll give you an example. A child may have spine injury, and this child needs the catheters, needs those things to use at school and to change all the time. So if you are taking a child to school where these services are not, then this child will automatically drop out because they are feeling uncomfortable staying at school because these things are not there. So we have been encouraging the Department of Special Needs not to think about only the easier disabilities, if I can say, call it like that. Knowing that for the blind, I'll buy the Parkins braille and I give them. For the physically disabled, I'll give them the wheelchairs and crutches and they go to class. We have these other disabilities that require more attention, and these are not yet catered for in schools, in the service provision, and in whatever we are doing. So for us, this is a huge challenge, because when you look at the statistics where I'm telling you that we have increased enrollment, you still find that the enrollment is targeting these other easier disabilities as compared to those that have multiple or intellectual disabilities. So we still think that government has a big role to play in this. NUDIPU can do what we can, but the entire responsibility of providing for education for children with disabilities and for all children generally, it's upon government. But government has not come up clearly to pick out some of these challenges and even see what intervention should we devise. Is there where we can have a special way of training these children, maybe from home, without necessarily bringing them to school? Is there where we can move them away from the normal curriculum and we concentrate on supporting them to learn the daily living activities? We don't see that coming out in the plannings that the Ministry of Education is doing. And because of that, that's why the parents also feel that there's nothing much that government can do about their children that have multiple disabilities. So that's a big challenge. Then the other challenge is about the cost of items. We normally say that children with disability, where a child with disability is, normally that household is 3 times poorer than that without disability, especially in the rural communities. In the urban centers here, people try to ensure that their children are catered for even when they're in the houses. But in the rural communities, even if a parent wanted to do something, they don't have money. Yet this child requires specialized equipments. For instance, if it's a child with physical disability, they will need a wheelchair, they will need crutches, they will need, and those require a lot of money. If it's a child with visual impairment, this child will require equipment like the Parkins braille, as I've been talking about, the talking computers, talking phones. All these things are expensive, but where is the money? And how can government come in to support us to reduce the burden on a parent who is having this child with disability? Because when the parent feels overwhelmed, they say now this child is a problem, this child is a burden, and they end up locking them up. Yet we are saying we want every child to go at school. We want every child to get a quality education, as we put it under the SDGs. So this is a big question that we throw to government to see how they work with us as NUDIPU, because NUDIPU cannot also handle everything. Even in schools, we are only handling what we are able to handle. But the problem of the matter is big. The number of children of children with disabilities still at home is bigger than the number of children with disabilities who are at school. And even we have been requesting government to do for us the research to ascertain how many children are still at home, children with disabilities, and what could be some of the challenges they are facing that are denying them the right to go to school. Maybe that will help government to see how to intervene and to address some of these challenges that they would have found out. But this study has not been done, and because it's not yet done, we are still living on speculations that there are many that are still at home, and we think that they are not attended to. So the challenges are many, but my colleague here can add.
Okay.
Thank you, Madam Esther. You have said it very well. Yes, and the biggest challenge would also be the teachers, the teacher capacity. As much as they have changed attitude, positive attitude in some of the pilot schools, like Madam Esther said, disability is not homogeneous. There will be a gap of how to support each individual learner in these mainstream schools. Our schools are so filled up with children. You look at a P1 class with 300 children, and there is this learner with the special needs that needs more attention. Because of that, the teacher may not be able to sufficiently support this learner because of the teacher-learner ratio. So we still have those challenges in our classes. The teaching materials is also a challenge for us. And also the fact that the schools are located far away from the children, and yet government policies that government schools do not normally have boarding sections. So that is also a challenge for our learners that come from far. Yes, and if there is a policy, there could be an adjustment for that to accommodate learners that cannot be able to walk distances from home to school. So those are the challenges we are still facing.
Okay, thank you very much, Madam Diana. You're still watching the Education Forum here on UBC TV. If you've just joined in, our topic today is inclusive education for learners living with disability. And yes, our guests are from the National Union for Disabled Persons. So, Madam Diana, according to your observations, which particular areas has the government scored highly in ensuring the education for learners with disabilities, and then which gaps need to be addressed?
Yes, government has provided the special schools to support particular learners with some special needs. For example, we have schools for the visually impaired, we have schools for the deaf learner, and then we have schools for the, mainly those are the schools, the special schools that are in place. That is also done in good faith to ensure that the learners access education. Government is also providing assistive devices in some of these schools. And the beauty is that government has given us space in the teacher training institution. The new teacher policy promotes inclusion, and the new modules that are being prepared for the next group of teachers, you know that we shall no longer be having primary teachers colleges, but we shall have them go for bachelor's level. The new modules are embedding in the component of special needs training. So these teachers that are going to go through the new curriculum at university level are going to get that knowledge on how to support this learner. That is a plus for the government, and we really thank them for making the teacher policy so inclusive. And now the gaps are that these teachers that are not going to go through that, the already in-service teachers still need more capacity building to ensure that they support all learners in the same environment. And for us to achieve inclusive education, we have to work together. Government has to work with development partners to see that all children are included in the inclusive, in the mainstream schools or in the education sector.
Right. Madam Esther, now speaking of organizations and community when it comes to disabled persons, now have community-based organizations played their roles to ensure in addressing challenges of students with disabilities, and what more needs to be done?
Most of the community-based organizations, their role is to advocate and identify children with disabilities at the community level, at the household level. I would say that yes, many of them have done this, but they get stuck with the children. For instance, in some of the districts where we are, we have district unions of persons with disabilities that are doing a big role of identifying children from homes and communities. But one of the challenges, as we said, is that the schools are far. And this child has multiple disabilities. They either need to be lifted to go to school, and who is there to lift them every day to take them to school. And even when they reach school, what is supposed to be done where there are no facilities. So that in itself, they are finding problems. Then we are seeing many of the community-based organizations advocating to the district education officers, telling them, yes, we need the schools to have teachers with special needs. We need the school environment to be adjusted. The stairs are so many, the children with wheelchairs cannot access. They are doing that bit of work. Some of them are part of the school management committees, but still they are finding challenges. As I said, if the policies are not clear and they are not there, then even if you're in the school management team, it may be difficult for you to see results or to cause change within the school that you are sitting on as a management member. So what needs to be done is that we need these community organizations to continue identifying, because for me I still believe that there are many children that are still seated in homes and with no single support, no single help, not even teaching them how to maybe support themselves within the house, within the home. So the community-based organizations are supposed to help us identify those children. They're supposed to make referrals. For instance, where we know that we have a special school, for instance, they can refer them there. Or where we don't have special schools and we have these pilot schools, they can work with the pilot schools to refer these children there. And still we think that the community-based organizations need to network amongst themselves to push their voice harder. Because sometimes if it's just the district union talking about an issue, they'll think, those are issues of persons with disabilities. But if we see other community organizations that are not necessarily working on disability, but they are integrating disability within what they do, and they network with the union that is in the district, they network with Save the Children, they network with World Vision, maybe we shall see more results in terms of enrollment of children with disabilities and also attaining the quality education at school. Because it's not a matter of taking a child to school and saying, yes, me as a parent have done my part, the child is there. We are asking, even when the child is at school, what kind of education are they supposed to get? What is the value of this child being in school? Others may end up counting years, like this one was there in year 1, then year 2, yet the people he started with are in P7, and for him is just at the same level. So the quality of education matters a lot. And unfortunately, this is the experience we are getting in the communities, in the schools we go, where NUDIPU is not operating. You find all children of different disabilities and different classes, moreover, with one teacher packed in one hall like this. And the teacher is the one to sort out to say, now this one and this one, these are blind and they are in P1. These are deaf, they are in P3. So they expect this one teacher, because she went to Chambogo to do special needs education, to take care of this whole confusion of children who are before them. So for us, we don't see that as quality education. We see that that is just a dumping. You say, let's pick them and dump them at school. At the end of the year, we say we are having 25 children with special needs. And yeah, they are part of our school. But what is the quality? What are they benefiting from the school when they come there? Are they able to move from one level to another? For me, I see that the communities need to do more around that, and the schools need to do more around that, plus the Ministry of Education. The other challenge I would want to highlight, Victoria, is about the inspectors. In all districts, we have inspectors of special needs education. Unfortunately, these inspectors are not doing their work. Yes, because if you find a mix of children of different classes with different disabilities under one teacher, I think you as an inspector, you'd be interested to know, how is this teacher managing? How are they able to teach? How are they able to attend to the special need of each child? You just know that there's no quality, but you know, the inspectors come and watch all this and they go away without even raising any concerns or without even making recommendations on how the situation should improve. So for me, I believe that the inspectors have a big role in ensuring that our children with disabilities get quality education, but they are not doing their work as they are expected to. Of course, they raise issues of budget. You know, the budget is not there, but even where you have been able to go, even if you are monitoring one school or two in a year, we want to see that your effect of monitoring is seen, but we don't see these things happen. Yeah.
All right, okay. Just for clarity, we remember you talked about different disabilities and different persons living with disabilities. Now, I just wanted some clarity. If there are so many people living with disability, then are there particular people with disabilities that are affected more than the other, and why?
We have disabilities that I was calling the easier to deal with, being that their level of reasonable adjustment needed is not much. I'll give an example. If someone is visually impaired, you know that they will need a support person and they will need an equipment to use for writing. And once you provide that, that's it. It's easy for them to easily cope up. If someone has a physical disability, if you allowed them to access, for instance, a building, they are sitting in class, they are seeing on the blackboard, and they may need a support person to push them around the class and in the compound. That's it. But we have disabilities, which I was calling the multiple and the intellectual. Those are a little complicated in a way that they need more than 2 interventions for you to see them become something useful in terms of education. So, for instance, if someone has an intellectual disability and also is not able to walk or even to sit, and they are not able to talk, you get the challenge? So it becomes difficult for you to say, I'll just come and put them in class. Then you are not helping, because they are not even able to sit. They are not even able to talk. They may be able to hear or not even to hear, but they want to get education. So that may require some kind of specialized arrangement that will enable them to get to a level. And sometimes it's not the normal curriculum that we are taking on. These may just need some kind of curriculum that allows them to, for instance, learn how to sit, learn how to communicate that maybe I'm hungry, learn to say that when I wake up I need to brush. Those are not simple things. When a child has no disability, they appear very simple. But when a child is having this disability, that may take you 5 years to achieve that. And it means that the normal school curriculum will not be relevant for them. It requires some kind of specialized curriculum with the specialized teachers on how they achieve this step by step. And these are things that are not happening. That's the reason a parent will tell you, now with this child of mine, what are you going to do with them at school? You see? And that's why I was calling them that they are the complicated kind of disabilities that we have. And yet they are the majority and most vulnerable that are not attended to. You get it? And we cannot say that we are achieving inclusive education when this group of people is not being attended to. Because whereas we are having, because as we speak now, we have many persons with physical disabilities that have graduated from universities, persons with hearing impairments that have graduated, persons with visual impairments with PhDs. But now the question is, how about these other disabilities? Should we leave them to waste? Should we just ignore them because they are born like that? And just know that many of them are being born every day, either due to medical conditions, others are genetic conditions, others are accidents, illnesses, you can never tell. But for us, when we are discussing disability, we are not normally interested in what causes it. We are interested in that, now I'm disabled, I'm here. So how do you manage the situation that we are in? And that's what we need to do around education, which is not yet happening. And that's why I said that the Ministry of Education, the Special Needs Department, has a huge task of looking out for specialized arrangements of handling children with deaf blindness that have issues around communication, and they have challenges around dealing with children with autism, children with Down syndrome. These are many children that are not being attended to, and yet there's no research being done on what needs to be done about them. Yet in other countries, we see these children going to school and they are being managed, and the teachers know exactly what to do. They are communicating using plain language, illustrations, and we see them enjoying education, which is not happening in Uganda. And in Uganda, when we raise these questions, either they will be ignored, or many times they will tell us there is no budget. For us, we always think about the budget even before we think about what interventions are needed for us to provide a budget. So those are challenges, Victoria, around education and disability.
Okay. Well, there's just so much. By the time the show is done, I'm going to remember everything that we have talked about here. And yes, there's a lot of information that we have.
Because you're our spokesperson on UBC.
I know. So we have a lot of information. I'm very sure that our guests today have a lot of information. But just like we always say, everything good comes to an end at some point. But, well, maybe you could give us some final remarks before we could say bye-bye to the show.
From what we have said and done, inclusive education cannot be achieved by one stakeholders. It is a concerted effort. Madam Esther talked about those disabilities that are so hard and multiple. We need rehabilitation from the health sector to support the children, to rehabilitate the children before they go to school. So we need a concerted effort to achieve inclusive education. We thank you so much for having interest in education for persons with disabilities, and I know together as a country, as development partners, we can all have a role to play in including learners with disabilities in the schools, mainstream schools, in the special schools. All we want to see is this learner being present in school, achieving and progressing to the next level.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you, Victoria, and thank you, UBC, for hosting us. My last remark is to say that issues around education of a child with disability are not easy to manage in just a short while, but we need a progressive way of intervening in each of these issues and seeing how we achieve step by step. So we are still hopeful that with our partnership with the Ministry of Education and other stakeholders, the parents, we shall get there. But we still need to do more around policy, we still need to do more around budget, and we still need to do more around attitude. If we do that and teacher training, we shall see ourselves maybe in 20 years to come getting somewhere in as far as inclusive education is concerned.
All right. Well, thank you very much for coming through on the show, and thank you very much for educating our viewers. I'm very sure many of them have learned something, and personally I've learned a lot, and we just pray that the good Lord blesses you through this journey with NUDIPU. And yes, that marks the end of the show today. And of course, our topic has been inclusive education for learners with disabilities. This is the Education Forum with me, Amuge Victoria, here on UBC TV.